Well, let's now cross live to the ancient city of Cairo in Egypt, where the Afrexim Bank is holding its third conference of the African Sub-Sovereign Government Network. Do stay with us and have a look.
Are attracting more money than investments in oil and gas or in energy requirements, which is critical to the industrialization of the continent. If we even put together all the 700 banks that are in Africa, commercial banks, their firepower also is extremely limited. My friend Leston is there. He can open an LC in Malawi to import 30,000 KT of gasoline to power schools or hospitals. So we have severe challenges in supporting, whether it's basic trade flow from a continent where we are net importers of product, to actually fueling our industrialization, whether it's developing upstream oil and gas projects or helping with logistics around pipelines, infrastructures, rehabilitation of refineries or building new refineries, or simply maintaining existing infrastructure around the energy value chain. So the challenges are very, very significant. And we have been working extensively with our partners, development financial institutions, commercial banks, and corporations like GEMCO or even Owando, Sahara, to put in place structures to try to mitigate or solve this. These are various forms of various different kinds of structures we put in place to actually meet these requirements. But this is not sufficient. Celine was telling you that we just built a refinery in Angola, but Angola's refining requirements are 200,000 barrels a day. And what the target we're actually looking at for Angola is 450,000 barrels a day. That should be able to serve not only Angola, but the neighboring countries of Zambia, Namibia, DRC, which is quite a large market, so that we move away from exporting our crude and we actually improve refining capacity at home and report. So there's a long way to go. Somebody said, how many more Afrexim banks do we need on the continent to be able to meet this challenge? That is why, in addition to what the bank is doing with its partners, the management of the bank and working on the sidelines with the African Producers Petroleum Organization, APO, which is an 18-member state of African producing oil companies, have decided to create another multilateral agency, which is going to be focused on financing the energy requirements of the African and Caribbean people. So we are in the final stages of getting all the approvals. It is going to be an organization set up by treaty, the same way Africa Exim Bank will be. It will have three classes of shareholders. The first class of shareholders will be all the African producing countries, national oil companies. Class B and C would be African investors and international investors from all walks of lives. The projected share capital of this company will be $5 billion. And we hope that we will go through the process of ratifying these establishment agreements and the charter and do the fundraising to commence operations by June 2024. This Africa Energy Bank, the Africa Energy Bank will now be able to help African producing member states to take advantage of the over 125 billion barrel reserves of oil and gas, oil that we have, and over 75 trillion cubic of gas that we have on the continent. This will not only help our sovereigns in raising the much needed foreign exchange from trading or exporting of these resources after they have been transformed, which again is industrialization on the continent. This bank will help to improve, develop assets, both oil and gas assets, help to develop infrastructure which is more needed in terms of refineries, in terms of logistics, pipelines, regional pipelines, will help to build storage facilities to move these products in a more secured way closer to the markets, and will help also to finance the training and of the capacity building of people in this sector. So we are really looking forward to this new institution. We're working together with our partners, hoping that we'll be able to serve that gap, that ever-growing gap. which is it's there for this sector on the continent. So I'll leave it there, and we can continue the conversation.
Thank you so much, Rene. You know, you mentioned the $5 billion, and Melissa's eyes just light up and said, "Oh my God, $5 billion!" And because I know Genesis is also working on a number of projects and trying to see that funding. So Rene's got $5 billion. I'm just thinking whether part of that African Energy Bank, 5 billion share capital, whatever other funds coming, will be useful and will help in what you're doing in your organization. So I'm looking at what you would look to see happen and the opportunities that such amount of money will be able to deliver and help us to catalyze moving very quickly to deliver energy access at a price that is affordable, reasonable to those who are investing, and reasonable to the 1.2 billion people or so on the continent, and help us to leapfrog very quickly, not only on the social side of political dividend, but also to deliver on industrialization, trade, and other things.
Thank you very much. I think if we start by looking at the current energy access rates in Africa, at the moment we have a just below 40% access rate, electricity access rate in Africa. You take that point and put it to the side. And then you look at Africa as the biggest market for solar irradiation. We have the most abundance of renewable energy resources in Africa. You put that aside. And then you look at Africa as the biggest continent or the biggest resources in raw materials, cobalt, lithium, manganese, chrome, the likes. And then you wonder to yourself, and not to mention that we also have significant amount of gas reserves. And then you say to yourself, why is it that a continent that is so blessed in human resources, in natural resources, in geopolitical resources, fails to have an energy access demand? And what we found at Genesis, having been deploying and developing projects over the last 2 decades, is it comes down to 2 things. First of all, we need infrastructure investment in Africa. To date, you have a country like Zambia, that 80% of its electricity is from hydropower. It's not base load. And then you have Zambia that is producing significant amount of copper, but they have no access to gas. Whereas Mozambique has significant access, significant resources in the gas. If we had a pipeline from Mozambique into the copper belt in Zambia, then we've got a conversation we're talking about, not only from a power generation perspective, but also from a mining perspective. You have countries like DRC that are major mining companies in DRC, but DRC does not have the gas. Right next to them, you've got Congo-Brazzaville, that has significant amount of gas in Congo, that if we had pipelines, if we had infrastructure, you were able to set your power plants either in Congo or set pipelines into DRC to allow power generation. So from where we are standing, we need significant amount of investment in infrastructure. Imagine an Africa where we have a Cape to Cairo pipeline. Imagine in Africa where you can put up a solar plant in the Northern Cape in South Africa and connect to a mining company in Zimbabwe. This is what we need, and we need to band together as Africans to come up with African solutions to African problems, to ensure that there's aggregation amongst governments, aggregation amongst DFIs, aggregation amongst developers, to ensure that we are the piper and we then determine the tune we play to.
You're talking about national energy for Africa, and this is no time for energy nationalism, in a manner of speaking. So open skies Africa, one Africa, help your neighbor, help everyone. So you're talking about the 5 billion African Energy Bank, and I'm thinking, where do we find, Melissa, where do we find this fund to build this pipeline of energy infrastructure? I'm sure you heard Rene talk about the top 700 banks in Africa. We put everybody together, the size of their capitalization and what they're able to deliver. So we need huge money for this huge infrastructure across the landscape, as it were. So what's your suggestion here?
Well, to go back to the theme of African solutions to African problems, Yes, we can look east, and yes, we can look west. But Africa has significant amount of resources, financial resourcing, funding that we can leverage on. The challenge is we work in streams. Genesis would have a stream, this DFI has a stream, AFDB has a stream, Afreximbank has a stream. If we aggregate, if you think about crowdfunding from a DFI perspective, if you think about crowdfunding from a private equity perspective, if we come together and join those streams, then we're a powerful force to ensure that we are funding projects in Africa. Some of the things, and it's important to also mention the great work Afreximbank has done. They've just introduced or announced the PAP system, and we believe that is going to significantly improve intra-Africa trading, particularly even intra-African funding. And finally, I think what we really want to consider is a dual currency continent. We understand the history of Africa and Africa needing to maintain its sovereignty. Maintain your local currencies. But if we really want to be big players on the market, we need to aggregate and come up with one currency where we can trade. If someone in Congo-Brazzaville is trading with someone in Egypt, they've got one currency backed by our natural resources, which are in abundance. So I implore everyone to think more about how dynamic we can be, come away from traditional forms of financing and look inside. And finally, if you allow me, Bosun, really look into domestic funding. I think there's a lot we can do in domestic funding with commercial banks. There's a lot we can do with domestic funding even with family offices. There's a lot we can do with domestic funding even with private equity firms. And really, it's a matter of coming together and really realizing if we've got these ambitions to be the global player, then we have to band together.
Put your hands together for Melissa. Because again, I don't have to reveal my sources, but I can tell you for sure that the EFCFTA is moving towards that single currency. There's a major initiative going on that the EFCFTA is working on with the African Union and others, and they're moving the needle to see the paperwork, putting all the African central banks together to come to some form of agreement to get the common currency sometime in the future to happen. Thank you, Melissa. Now I'm sitting down here, and Hannah is re-emerging in everything we've been discussing. Anna, it's good to have you on board. And Melissa talked about whether we need to look west or we need to look east. And China is playing big in the African continent. They're bringing a whole lot of money. They're helping us to raise the level of what we are producing. The footprint is here. The huge money is also on the continent. So our backroom conversation earlier was whether China is that big brother that we should look up to on the continent to resolve some of our finance and investment needs in the energy space. How do you respond?
So just to give a bit of introduction as to why you're asking me about China as well, for those of you that don't know, I run an international development consultancy, it's an African-led, African-owned consultancy. We have our headquarters in Beijing. And we also have offices in Nairobi and London. And one of the reasons why we set up in Beijing was because China, of course, has got a massive footprint on our continent. At the same time, there's a significant opportunity to do more and do better with China and Chinese stakeholders. I've been called sort of Africa's ambassador in China, and not because we haven't got African ambassadors in China, but because a lot of the time those ambassadors and so on are looking at really putting forward their bilateral relationship. What we try and do as a consultancy is to provide advice to African and Chinese and others stakeholders who would like to do better and who would like to know more about the whole continent and have a full continental picture. And when it comes to energy, there's no doubt that Chinese investment, Chinese lending, and I separate out lending and investment, has been going onto the continent, both on energy and in particular renewable energy and particularly hydro so far. The new area where Chinese firms are looking at is solar and wind. And it is very important, and Melissa was actually asking me why should we look at China for that? Most of the hydropower that Chinese firms have engaged in has not been financed by Chinese banks. The vast majority has been financed by our governments, but they have the expertise because they've got that scale. When we look at solar so far, and I do think solar potential is extremely important to be, we've talked a lot about oil and gas, fossil fuels, etc. I do think solar potential is extremely important to be really promoting. We have the largest potential across the world on solar. Our potential is higher than the rest of the world in pretty much every single African country compared to the rest of the world. But we have 12.6 gigawatts capacity. China has got almost 400 gigawatts capacity of solar. Europe, 200, but that's spread across lots of European countries. Japan itself has got 79. Japan, 100 times smaller than the continent, has got 79 gigs, and we have 12, almost 13. There is something that needs to be done, and we need scale. And the only partner that can do scale, China and India to some degree, but China for sure. Now, most of our capacity is also in South Africa. Half of that solar capacity is in South Africa. So there's also a case about diversifying and also increasing capacity in the rest of the continent if we're going to be really doing the most with our potential. And so that's why we work and try and encourage Chinese investors to look at a whole range of African countries and African projects, put even cross-country projects, which have typically been financed very little and typically been very difficult to structure. There are some significant opportunities with those types of projects with Chinese players. Not to say that other foreign investors can't get in there, but we cannot finance these things on our own. Our economy, the scale of our economies are just too small to really raise enough finance at the scale we're talking about. Yes. We've got one major large solar plant. The largest solar plant on the continent is Egypt. It is 1.6 gigs, right? The others are in China. The others are in India. We can do a lot more, and we need that scale, and it's only that scale that's really going to deliver, especially when we're coming to industrial growth. It's not just about access to energy for residents. It's also about industrial growth, and that's where we need scale. So that's the kind of, I guess that's my answer to why China, why look east. There's a business case for every single foreign investor, but that's a business case for this one, and that's the one that we know best, and we know how to pitch to them.
Thank you so much, Anna. My one last question, because again we're running for time, into what the future of energy mix for the continent looks like in terms of, if we look into the next 5-10 years, what does it look like in terms of, what's the portfolio look like? Let me start from you, Selim.
I think the point was made in terms of the renewables. Another stat I can throw out there is, Africa has 60% of the world's solar potential, yet it has about 1% of capacity today. So I think it's inevitable that the renewables will continue to grow in conjunction with gas, as I said before, and gas will displace, hopefully, the higher polluting production such as diesel, HFO, and things like that. But then I think we need to also think about hydrogen. Hydrogen is going to be very, very, very interesting as the cost of production goes somewhere from like $4 a kilo to $2 a kilogram, say in the next 6 years. And these are estimates from people like IEA. So there's a case to be made there in terms of exporting hydrogen in a competitive way to other parts of the world, but also using the hydrogen locally to produce things like ammonia, which then goes into the food security for Africa argument. So I think we will see renewables keep growing, hydrogen hopefully coming online, say in the 6-7 years when the costs make sense, and then and of course gas, as mentioned before.
Interesting. Alex, Adwando, what do you think about green hydrogen? Namibia is putting funds together to start exporting. So do you think the race for hydrogen is on? Do you think it's going to be a major part of our energy portfolio moving forward?
I often like to focus on what you have to get to where you're trying to get to. And whilst hydrogen is accessible, we've seen the technology cost of developing and deploying hydrogen is far more in excess of the energy cost to create that process. So there's a lot of improvement that needs to happen in those spaces for us to then champion any cause there. But I just want to, if I can touch on Salim's question in line with this, we know for a fact how to do the oil and gas stuff. We have our locals that do that. Everything else in the renewable industries, we are learning at the moment. Now, if we look at a 50 years is not long, it's not a long time, right? If we look at 50 years, I think Africa will play a significant role in understanding what projects are right for the continent, learning, transferring those skills, and creating those scalable investments as proof of concepts and largely deployments to shift, said, the higher emitting or polluting components of our energy mix. However, I really believe our focus should be on extracting every single molecule of gas underneath our feet to propel this continent, to greatness. Yes. And if we understand that concept, then we don't waste too much time dealing with trying to be the best in a space that we are still learning. There's an argument for the fact that if 70% of the pollution today was put in by largely 2 continents, and they are so advanced, and they have the technology to take out this pollution, how about we focus the transition path for one that says they focus on taking out the pollution they've put in the air, while we focus on developing our continent for that additional 0.5% of emission that we are likely to put in the air. So that will be my view. It's not to focus too much on this, quite complex approach to solving this problem.
Looks like a soundbite for COP28. Okay. Rene.
So the 2 previous speakers, I'll build on what they've said. Drill, baby, drill. Yes. Let's drill all the miracles that are sitting out there. Why? The first point is that the largest culprit of the debate on pollution in Africa is the shipping industry. Fundamentally because we export everything that we produce, and we import the same things back. So if we use our existing resources in fossil fuels to industrialize the continent, we further reduce the emissions in the world. And that helps Africa in value addition, in transformation, in job creation, in keeping the revenues, the royalties from the existing businesses. Let us use the technologies that are there to improve on what we have. Yeah. Let us work with other forms of energy that we understand and that are cost effective, like solar. But if you want to get us to start doing things that we have to learn and invest again in capital goods that will be imported from the West, you are adding an additional burden for Africa. We believe that the energy mix should be defined by the resources that we have. Those resources that we have today are largely in oil reserves and in gas reserves spread across the continent. More than 22 African countries have got oil and gas reserves, have got oil reserves, and more than half of the 55 African countries have got gas reserves to power the continent. If we work together, we can develop those resources, and we can power Africa from those reserves. I'm not saying that we shouldn't develop our hydrogen. I'm not saying that we shouldn't develop alternative energy sources, but those things come at a huge cost. There's a huge learning curve. I don't think that we're going to add debt again on African countries that are suffering with interest rates that are created by other people, suffering with debt sustainability created by other people to incur further levels of debt. Some persons also mentioned in the panel local currency. Local currency is very important. We need to start using our local currency resources to develop our energy resources on the continent. So while it's fair to the world to manage the climate change and carbon emissions, I think that we have our own fundamental problems that we're trying to deal with. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rene from African Bank. Thank you. Anna?
Yeah, so I'll also build on what the three speakers have said. I think, for sure, we should be using our resources that we have. I also think, and based on modelling that we've done at my firm, we will not get to the Sustainable Development Goals if we do not also, at the same time, use our renewable resources. And I think that's part of the issue. How can we do everything together all at once, right? That's the big question. And I think that is our challenge. It is not about, one or the other. It is about all of it together. And I think our future energy mix will be a mix, for sure. But how do we crowd in resources from the rest of the world who are doing these things? They're creating these mixes. The fact that we already have 400 gigs of solar in China shows it can be done. So it should also be done on our continent. We have land that is 3 times the size, much more potential. So overall, the cost should be even lower. However, if you look at the existing solar projects, for example, and I think this will also extend to other renewable projects, you look at the equivalent size, and very simple back of the envelope stuff. It's equivalent size, equivalent delivery in terms of potential, in terms of energy out, gigawatts, etc. You put it on the African continent and you're paying double, literally double. And we can't afford that either. So we also, and it comes back to also a point that Honourable Boholo was talking about, we do need to work, whether it's a bankability or not, we do need to work on how do we really get rid of this Africa risk? How do we have bankability to really reduce the cost on the continent, make it at least equivalent to others? There's no reason why the renewables should be more expensive on our continent than they are anywhere else. Simple as that.
I completely agree. Well, I agree with you completely. It's a low-hanging fruit. Melissa, give me 30 seconds closing remark.
I'll try to do it in 20. Just to piggyback off what everyone said and without sounding like a broken record, particularly on the last speaker, I think it's important as Africans that we reimagine what this African risk is. Who are the voices that are telling us there's the risk profile in Africa? And if we start to really look inside and see where is the actual risk and where is the perceived risk? Yes, there's risk in Africa. There's ways in which we can mitigate it. Yes, we can become a global player, but for us to become a global player, you need significant amount of energy. You need to benefit in Africa. To benefit, you need energy. And what I'd say is our energy mix, as everyone has said, is inclusive of gas as a base load, because the renewables will do great. The renewables will not give us the base load we need for Africa to rise. And I'll end by saying, and I love this saying, they say if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, take someone with you. So join us as we light up Africa one community at a time.
I love that party shot. Ladies and gentlemen, dear delegates, I present to you my panel. Thank you so much, Melissa, Anna from Development Reemerging, Rene from African Bank, Alex from Owando Energy Resources, and Salim from GEMCO. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful panelist for me. Thank you very much, everyone. Now my panelists will just take one or two pictures because we've got a whole lot more. The third part of this session, and the final part, is the case study which will be presented by X-Links. Now, X-Links got a very ingenious project being put together, and I'm going to allow my guest to speak directly to that. Is raring to go. Please put your hands together for Louis Blongo, who is from X-Links. Please put your hands together for him. He's the development manager for this particular project. He's got a few slides to put up here. Then he'll walk us through those slides and what this project is all about, where it's coming from, and where he's delivering it to for his company. Great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, if we can put the slides up, that'd be amazing. Thank you. Okay, if we can get it wider, that'd be even better. Otherwise, yeah, perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you, Boson. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I feel very privileged, to be fair, to be here in front of you after such an amazing panel that we've had. I hope I can also bring something new to the picture that you've had through all the speakers with, to be fair, a truly unique and I hope what will be a game changer project, X-Links, between the Kingdom of Morocco and the UK. My name is Louis. I'm a former McKinsey and IEA member, and I joined X-Links a year and a half ago as developer of new projects. I was recruited by our CEO, Simon Morish, who launched the company in 2019. X-Links, and I will go into the details very shortly, is a UK-based renewable developer and power cable developer. And so today we're going to speak about renewable energy security, and also green manufacturing in Africa and abroad. So hopefully exciting topics, so please bear with me. So today, four main points. First of all, I want to introduce you to X-Links' vision, then to the Morocco UK Power Project, which is the first project of our company. Then X-Links team that is backing up this project and making that possible, and finally guiding you through the project roadmap. So, but first of all, X-Links vision, right? First and foremost, we want to accelerate the energy transition. We've heard about it, there is so much to do in Africa, and there are amazing fossil resources to power that. But also, as it has been mentioned, there is amazing renewable power in Africa, and Africa can be, hence, really part of the transition. Secondly, we want to bring innovation to the energy sector and solving the intermittency of renewables. So you may have heard that problem with renewable is sometimes that it's intermittent, so you don't have solar and wind all the time. But as you will see, we are developing a concept where we can actually get renewable close to 24 hours a day. Thirdly, and this is really core to X-Links and to the project, we want to develop new green industries in the origin and destination countries to be part of green manufacturing development in Africa and abroad. And finally, so important, especially in those troubled times, one of the part of X-Links' vision is also to participate into energy security and reduce system costs, so electricity costs for final consumers. Now, I will spend a bit of time on this slide that basically explains what X-Links is as a project. So you can see the idea is to link Morocco to Great Britain in a direct line with a subsea power cable. So we will install in Morocco close to 11.5 gigawatts of renewable power. So as you may have heard, that's equivalent to the total solar power installed today in Africa. This will be a mix of solar and wind power, and coupled with a very, very high battery capacity, 20 gigawatt. We have secured in Morocco a 1,500 kilometer square site. That's roughly the size of Greater London. to install this renewable power to be sent to the UK via a subsea cable that will go along the shores and reach the UK. In the UK, it will deliver basically 3.6 gigawatt, which is the equivalent of typically 3 major power stations, and power 7 million households in the UK. We have been designated by the UK very recently project of national significance, very recently, so it was in September. And so the project is moving forward very well, including the CFD negotiation price with the UK government. And finally, so I talked about it creating, right, green industries. That's so important for us. In Morocco, 60% of all the construction capex will be from local content, and we will participate in setting up a solar manufacturing industry in Morocco with thousands of jobs. But also, and so in value is between 2 and 3 billion, basically. And also in the UK, we are setting up a subsea cable industry to power this project. But part of you may be wondering, like, how a startup creating in 2019 can deliver such a project, right? And one of the answers is that we are very proud to have a team that I think is unique and can deliver this project. So let me guide you through a bit. And this team has convinced, as you can see on the screen, TAQA, but also Octopus Energy to join the project through equity last year. And so now they are backing us very strongly. But just to guide you through, so Sir Dave Lewis is our chairman. He's the former CEO of Tesco. We also have Sir Jan Davis, who's the former global managing partner of McKinsey. And maybe some of you know him actually personally, but we are extremely lucky to have Paddy Padmanathan being our vice chair. He's the one who basically made Aqua Power, a Saudi renewable developer, become a 75 billion asset company. And so he's bringing extreme knowledge, expertise about how you can make those Giga projects come real. So very lucky to have him. And so, as I mentioned, we now have 2 board members from TAQA following their investment last year, and also the CEO from Octopus Energy, which is one of the main energy utility growing in Europe right now. And you can see, so our CEO, Simon, he's a serial entrepreneur. He has launched many dia before launching Xlinks, and was awarded like Entrepreneur of the Year a few years ago. So really, really lucky to have him driving everything. And Daya, who's our chair from Morocco, we were talking about like renewable energy expertise in Africa. I mean, she has been part of Mazen, who's been developing all the amazing renewable projects in Morocco since more than 10 years. And she has joined Xlinks as the chair for Morocco. So this team makes us believe that we can deliver such a project. But also, it is a 4,000-kilometer subsea cable, so you may be wondering as well, like, how can you deliver that, right? It's never been done in the world. Today, the longest subsea interconnector is 800 kilometers, and we're lucky to have the person who did it, Nigel Williams, who delivered the project 300 million under budget and on time. And so he's now joined Xlinks and handpicking all the very best from his teams in his past 30 years experience to develop the subsea part of the project. So now, if you're just going a bit into the details, but also I guess it's helpful to see what it looks like, right? So when you look at the seafloor, it's like when you are above sea level. So basically you have hills, you have canyons, and you have even rivers. But just to say that basically if you compare North Sea Link route, which is today the longest interconnector subsea in the world, and Xlinks route, well, our HVDC team thinks that our route is easier. Yes, it's longer, but it's easier. Because in the case of North Sea Link, it's in the North Sea, and you may be familiar, but the North Sea is basically covered, the seafloor is covered with cables everywhere. And so they had to organize 105 crossings of oil pipelines, telecommunication cables, etc., etc. In our case, we have only 65, and mostly are basically discontinued assets. Also, the canyons in Norway were extremely steep, They also had to dig a tunnel through a mountain, basically, to make that happen. In our case, none of that, and the steepness is less. Hence, once again, even though the route obviously is challenging, being a 4,000 kilometer, we are very confident we can deliver it. Trying to change. And so in terms of cable production, we are setting up also a factory in Scotland that will be basically the world's largest subsea cable factory. So producing in Hunterston, Scotland. We just actually have announced yesterday a 9 million funding from the Scottish government into the project that will basically break ground mid next year. And so, yeah, this factory will basically deliver the cable to the X-Links project. Hence, we will have an extremely competitive price for the cable, as well as basically having the benefits of the latest HVDC technology with aluminium core. So, but in terms of timeline about this project, obviously the size of the project, Royal, once again, it's a basically 22 billion capex project with 11.5 gigawatt renewable energy and a 4,000 kilometer cable. So those things take time. We are right now, we have secured Series A in the last few months. We will be raising Series B for the development in the next few months, and we are aiming for financial close in mid-2025 to raise the full 22 billion. Then the construction will start, and finally in 2030 or 2031 early, the first electrons will flow from Morocco to Great Britain. Just before opening the floor to Q&A, if there are any questions, yeah, I really hope that with the three things in mind, right, energy, renewable energy security, and green manufacturing, I really hope this project has also bring a new perspective to you, because those projects, we do believe they can be delivered in Africa, such huge project which will be a first thing worldwide to be accomplished. We've talked about difficulty for funding, we've talked about many things, and renewable development in Africa that sometimes can be difficult, but we do think we can prove it at scale, and that this project will prove it in the next few years. Thank you very much.
Yes, put your hands together, please, for Louis. Thank you so much, Louis. Anyone in the audience have got a couple of questions or two for Louis very quickly for this project? We can take just one or two. Thank you. Anyone ready to go on the subsea projects? Louis, I think
I was here.
I think you did a very excellent. Okay, we got a question over there. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. How are you dealing with the financing?
So it's in progress. So basically, we will be looking at 22 billion, right? So now, if we take it, it's typically a 70-30 debt to equity first. So 70% debt, 30% equity, typically that we will target. To be very transparent in terms of debt, we have been already engaging with many banks, like all the major banks, including like Citi, BNP, etc., etc. There is huge interest. Why is that? Because many of those banks actually have now targets in terms of what money they can put towards fossil fuel development, and they cannot put so much compared to before. Hence, they're trying to redeploy this money. Having a fully green project like this one is basically a huge opportunity for them. So we have actually started our roadshow in terms of debt raising, and we've had like very, very positive initial feedback. In terms of equity, obviously TACA being part of the project helps a lot, and those players can obviously invest huge amounts of equity when required, if they are willing to. But also we've had like very good discussions with like pension funds and infrastructure funds in the world who are, funds who can basically deliver multi-billion checks when it comes to equity investment. So basically Paddy Padmanathan, the vice chair, he said financing is really not the biggest topic we have. It's more on the delivering the 4,000 kilometer cable. But
what are the guarantees being offered to the lenders?
Sorry?
what are the guarantees? What type of guarantees are being offered to the lenders?
I mean, so first of all, like FID will be in a year and a half, so the discussion have just started. So the guarantees, I guess, will be up to every lender to put up their guarantees. But what do you mean in terms of guarantees they could be asking for?
Well, I mean, such a project will need certain, I don't know, sovereign guarantees or certain purchase agreements that are guarantors. So who?
So first of all, yes. So first of all, once again, the UK and Morocco government are extremely involved and supportive of the project. The UK government, once as I mentioned it, have a type of contract that's called contract for difference, which is basically that you negotiate with the government that they will secure a certain price of the power you sell. So for instance, if you negotiate a 70 euro per megawatt hour contract with the government, then you will sell on the market the electricity or through PPAs. And if the price is below what you have negotiated with the government pays you. And if the price is higher, you pay the government. So a fixed price that gives extreme certainty to the lenders. And actually, you may be asking why the UK? And that's the reason why. Because the UK has this CFD framework that enables energy financing in a really great way. But also the American government has already given us the 1309 authorization to export power on a provisional basis. So we have strong support on both sides at political level.
Most of this power is solar?
Most of
the actual renewable is solar?
So no, it's, I mean, yeah, the majority, yes, it's roughly 7 gigawatts, and the rest is wind, which is basically 4 gigawatts.
Thank you.
Any other question for Louis in the room? Okay, if there are no other questions, let's put our hands together for Louis Blandly. Thank you so much. It's good to have you. Thank you very much for wrapping up this three-part session. And thank you very much, everyone, for being a very distinguished audience, so for sitting through for this session on energy. Thank you, everyone. I think we're moving on to another session coming right after this. And I think that will be a parallel session, which is focused on agriculture. Thank you very much, everyone. Please put your hands together for yourself. I am Boston Omofaye from Arise News. Thank you very much, everyone.
And that was our very own hardworking Arise business correspondent, Bosin Amafaye, live from Cairo, Egypt, as he just wrapped up the three-part session on energy with a series of panels with other key players within the industry. Now, it's been a lot that's been discussed in these last couple of minutes, so let me just go through as much as I can very quickly. In the first panel, we did see Mr. Bosin sitting with a panel of key industry players discussing a range of issues, including the importance of African sovereignty and the importance of us banding together in order to create some kind of singular currency for trade within Africa. They were also exploring the investment opportunities that we have on the continent, specifically speaking on the stages of getting agreements together in order to start some kind of operations by June of 2024. They want to help Africa producing member states take advantage of the 125 billion barrels of reserves of oil and gas that we have on the continent in order to help raise some kind of foreign exchange and improve and develop our oil and gas assets, improve our infrastructure on the continent, which we know is quite lacking, our storage facilities, which are crucial, and to finance training and capacity building within the sector. They were also talking about the big C word, that is China, Africa's quote-unquote big brother financially, as Africa and China have been working quite a lot. China has been looking to finance the energy space, and of course Africa is looking for ways to increase capacity and industrial growth within the continent. Then the second part, we saw Louis, who just took to the stage. He is part of the X-Links group. He's a former McKinsey member and the current developer of new projects for X-Links. Well, X-Links, as he explained to us, is a UK-based renewable and power cable developer. And he was speaking on the importance of energy security, also showing us their subsea project and exploring other ways of green manufacturing in Africa and abroad. This three-part session on energy has been quite informative. It is about day 6 of this Intra-Africa trade fair going on in Cairo, Egypt. Of course, we have a lot of our correspondents on ground from Arise to give us all the updates and, of course, to represent Nigeria to the fullest. Thank you so much for staying tuned. We have much more coming up on Newsday.